Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September edition of the Audio Programmer Meetup. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with us today. We've got some really interesting topics to be discussing tonight and a diverse range of speakers. My name's Rachel Locke. I co-host this meetup on the second Tuesday of every month with my co-host Joshua Hodge. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors. They are Sonox and Focusrite. Thank you for your continued support and allowing us to make this happen once a month. I'd like to remind everyone that we've got the audio program meetup coming up in November. The dates this year are going to be the 14th to the 16th of November. All the information.
Sorry, that's APC, the Audio Developer Conference. I think you said the Audio Programmer Meetup.
Oh, the names are so similar. Yes, I meant the Audio Developer Conference. Yeah. We're not doing a 3-day meetup, unfortunately. No. Sorry for everyone that's now disappointed. Yes, the Audio Developer Conference will be the 14th to the 16th of November this year. And you can get all your information and tickets at audio.dev. And we hope to see you there. The diversity scholarships are now closed for this year, but thanks to everyone who shared those around on LinkedIn and on social media. I think that we got a good amount of people signing up to that this year, and good luck to everyone that signed up. Hope to see you there. I'm now going to pass over to Josh, who will introduce our first guest for this evening.
Yes, and before I did that, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. So you're actually helping to give a workshop for ADC, aren't you, with Dynamic Cast team? Is that right?
Yes. I'm not sure if it's been officially announced, but I'm 99% sure it's going ahead.
It's on the public schedule, so I'll go ahead and.
Okay. I didn't see that.
Slow launch.
Oh no! Now I have to commit to it.
So yes. Can you tell us a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So I'm part of, what would you call it? Maybe a collective called Dynamic Cast, and we're based in Berlin and in London. I'm part of the London edition of Dynamic Cast, and we run monthly meetups that are focused on C++, and the main focus is increasing diversity in the C++ industry. And we run meetups for underrepresented groups to come and study in a safe space where they can talk about what they want to learn and share their experiences. And we discuss topics every month related to some C++ concept, and we code together. It's really fun. And I do that with my co-host, Harriet Dury. She's currently working with Jules and Cesare at SoundStacks. Is that right company? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So we actually both did the same masters, and we met last year at ADC through the diversity. They had an evening event for the diversity scholarship attendees, and we met there, which is really cool. So some really good things can come out of ADC. It's a really good place to network, and really cool things like Dynamic Cast can come out. And moving on to what's happening at ADC this year, we came up with this idea along with Anna, who used to be working with Ableton. Some of you might have met her at ADC or otherwise. And she was running the Berlin version, or the original, of Dynamic Cast. And we had this idea for newcomers to the audio programming industry, that the focus this year on workshops, there would be a portion of the workshops that would focus on welcoming newcomers, and we would cover some specific concepts like software engineering and DSP. And me being more on the DSP side, I'm going to hopefully deliver a workshop on some introductory DSP concepts, and maybe we'll build something as well. And I think Anna and Harriet will focus a bit more on software engineering practices, perhaps C++ related, because it's more widely used language for audio. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Nice. Yeah. There's a really exciting program that's on that they have for ADC this year, and you can actually find it. I believe that the schedule is on audio.dev/schedule, but if you go to audio.dev and at the top there is a tab that says schedule. You click on that and you can actually see the schedule up to this point. And it's a really great conference. I'll be there, and it's going to be from the 14th to the 16th. So as Rachel said, that first day will be workshops, and then the following 2 days will be the actual conference itself. And it's a great opportunity if you want to meet other people who are also in this industry or looking to get into this industry. It's a very welcome conference, and I can't champion it enough. So hope to see you there. Before we go into our first talk, just wanted to also give a couple of announcements. So first thing is, if you're not familiar with our Discord group, we now just broke over 8,000 people in our Discord. So it's people from all different levels and all areas of audio software development, and it's really awesome to see this community grow. And if you're not part of it yet, I invite you to join, and you can join us on theaudioprogrammer.com/community. We also have a jobs board, so we help audio developers to find jobs and companies to link up with audio software developers, and we have some really great clients, and you can find out about all those job opportunities and contract opportunities on theaudioprogrammer.com/recruitment. And one more announcement before we get started. The Audio Programmer is going to be starting a wiki. So in our Discord group for years, people have been asking us to have to start some type of website that has a common knowledge base for people that, because many of the questions that people ask are sometimes have already been answered in the past in our Discord group. And so this is a way that we wanted to be able to allow people to document something in place. So when somebody asks a question that's been asked a million times before, we can just send them to that link, and it'll have it'll hopefully over time become just a cornucopia of audio programming tips and advice and best practices. So I will have the link for that soon, and it'll be a great opportunity for people to be able to contribute their advice and also to find out more about audio programming, and I'm really excited about it. So with that, we will pass the mic over to myself, because I'm actually going to be doing the interviewing along with the Modalics team. So we have Eyal Amir or Lubianiker.
You got
it. Yeah.
So.
Did I get it right?
Almost.
Lubianiker.
Yeah. There we go.
Lubianiker. That's it. That's it.
You did it.
And they're part of the Modalics team, and they've created a new product that's just come out called Beat Scholar. And I thought that it'd be really interesting to have them here on the Audio Programmer Meetup, because so many people come into our Discord and they ask about this process of creating their own company. How do we take something from a prototype or something that they may have developed in university, and take it and build a company around this and release it properly as a product that is able to work across all operating systems and across all DAWs and the challenges that are around that. So it's been fascinating, and I'm really proud of Eyal, especially because Eyal has been here with us at the Audio Programmer from the very beginning. From the time that he was actually working at Waves. He was I think he was the first podcast that we ever had for the Audio Programmer, and watching him grow from a developer at Waves to then he went to work with Steve Duda over at Expert for a couple years, and then he decided to spin off his own company. And watching his growth as a developer as well has been really amazing. So I'm super privileged to have both of them here to discuss these things, and I hope that you find it as helpful as I do. So enough of my rant. I will pass it over to you. Can you tell us just a little bit about, so I talked about Eyal a little bit, or can you tell us a little bit about your history and your journey into the industry?
Sure. I mean, the story is kind of combined at a certain point, so I guess that point would make a good segue to how we started the company and everything. But basically, I started out as a musician, a bass player more specifically. It's a big guitar with floppy strings for those of you that are not sure. Anyway, yeah. So I've always been interested in music and technology, like as an amateur, you would say. I've always collected pedals and all sorts of things that make weird sounds, and I was curious about how to combine them and make them work together and all that. So I've always had a sort of affinity to it, you can say, like a knack to figuring stuff out. But I've never quite learned anything traditionally, and I guess we're kind of similar in that sense. We're driven by curiosity. So yeah, fast forward several years after touring with artists around the world, mainly a lot of high-profile guitar players and people like that. I don't know if I should name drop if that's good for the podcast, but
yeah, go ahead, name drop away, please.
People like Marty Friedman from Megadeth formerly, and Gus G, who played with Ozzy Osbourne, and Ron Thal. Yeah, there's a list somewhere, probably online somewhere. But anyway, after years of doing that, basically, wait, I think I met you maybe after my first tour is when Eyal and I met, and he called me up. I was a fan of his way before he knew me. And this is like talking about like almost 10 years ago, way before we even considered starting a company or getting into the software business. So at a certain point, he just, called me up, and I was feeling like I was watching his videos and thinking, why am I not in them? I was so like jealous because he had this amazing band or online project called Project RNL. So at a certain point, he called me up and was like, how would you like to audition? And I was like, well, I can make some time for that. And secretly, I was like ecstatic. And like from the first, it's sort of a love story. No, from the first moments like we met, I was like, okay, this guy totally gets it. Everything I talked about before, like he's a researcher. He looks for the deepest part in like everything he's doing. And we kind of clicked immediately on that, on the musical side, and then in like, I don't know, dozens of hours of conversations just about everything. So from that moment on, we kind of joined forces around everything we could, work out to do together, whether it's a musical project. It was mainly music at first, but anything I needed help, Eyal was like the first phone call, and I guess it was the same. We kind of started collaborating back then. And should I move on to Waves and all that? Okay. So I guess Eyal was contacted by Waves at a certain point because he was, while we were doing the band and everything, he was kind of, he made a name for himself being like combining like cutting edge technologies and making interesting music with them. So he had a contact at Waves that kind of brought up the idea to do something together, like with Project RNL, which was at that point mainly the two of us kind of running the production side of things. And Eyal wasn't sure what to do, but at a certain point he came up to me and said, how would you like to come with me to a meeting at Waves? And I was like, I barely knew anything at that point. I mean, I knew it from like being a bystander and watching Eyal work, and maybe I had some chops, very basic production chops. And I wasn't really sure what would come of it because at a certain point, like maybe a lot of listeners would connect with that. Like sometimes you're so sure that you're meant to do something. For me, it was playing bass for a living and having my life be around that. That you have this huge opportunity coming and you don't recognize it at first. I wasn't immediately like, oh, of course, I want to make plugins. Of course. I was like, what the hell? I'll come to the meeting. And that kind of ignited that part of our lives, which became very central at this point, with Bass Slapper, which was the first plugin that kind of we got thrown into the deep end pretty quick, and we had to figure a lot of stuff out. But I guess maybe I can let Eyal talk for a second.
Yeah, the story of Bass Slapper is a story that Eyal told me a couple of years ago, and it's one of my favorite origin stories when it comes to
I like that.
how they get into the industry. So maybe if you could recap that story, Eyal, just how you got into software development, how the creation of this plugin, because you weren't even programming at the time, were you? You weren't even developing.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so true, and that's how my path with Or is actually kind of like very very parallelized. How do you say
Parallel.
Parallel,
Yeah,
very parallel,
yeah,
right? In the sense that yeah, so I don't want to go too much into this because we have so much new stuff that we're doing now, but yeah. So what happened was, we get this offer to develop a product, and then Or and I start to come with all these ideas about like a smarter kind of instrument, which actually really connects to what we're doing today and everything. So we had all these ideas for how to make something feel like it's played, right? And we kind of pitched that, and they liked it, but they had no idea how to do this. And I kind of volunteered to do the programming part of this, even though I had no idea that I can actually do that. It was more of like how do you say it? It was almost like I wished that I could do this more than I could really do this, and that's how we embarked on this journey. Because on these two plugins, Bass Slapper and Bass Fingers, that we made, Or and I together were like learning so much, because I was very deep into the programming, but he was like sampling and designing sound effects and helping us, define what the instrument is and how you would play, a bass-like instrument on a keyboard. So we both kind of gone through a process of doing this, which kept on for a few years with a few like detours, I guess, in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I at a certain point after Bass Fingers, I stayed with Waves to develop both first software and then hardware. Actually, I was doing like hardware development for a couple of years, and Eyal was doing other projects. But we always had a sense that at some point we're gonna sync back up and pick things up. And what he said about like the process with both products we did for Waves, Bass Slappers and Bass Fingers, I guess like it really planted the seed, for not only our ability to make something, but to like for us to kind of write our manifesto around instruments and that world in general, So we had like, even though we always felt like a strong feeling of ownership. We didn't feel like, we're doing this gig for Waves. We always felt like this represents us. This represents what we think about, about that world. So it kind of, I liked what he said, like that, it made me realize, yeah, what we're doing right now, even this product we just released called Beat Scholar, it's out right now. Even this product is a sort of continuation of that same area of taking like how musicians think and comprehend music, and then kind of finding a way, an elegant way to represent it, like both visually and in terms of user experience and all that.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about the way that this goes from an idea for a company or an idea for a product into something that you can actually sell to people, and just some of the challenges that come along with that? I mean, I'm sure that we could probably talk for a couple hours about that, but can you just give a brief overview of maybe some of those first discussions, what those were like, and what some of those first steps were? So I've got a great idea. Cool. Let's go do this. okay, what do we do? What's the first step?
Yeah. So maybe before we go there, I'll maybe we'll show a bit of Beat Scholar and what that is, and then we'll go back to the beginning because we have a little bit of like a timeline of things that happened in that process, right? So let's do some screen sharing here.
Okay.
Okay. So we got some screen hopefully happening. And
Yep.
this is Beat Scholar. The preset is actually called This is Beat Scholar. And this is the init preset. I'm just going to hit play, see what happens. Now, let's hear something else. So these are like a few of the presets that just come with the thing, and hopefully, as you've seen, it's a drum sequencer, drum composer of sorts, with a lot of cool rhythmic and visual things that I guess you can do with this. And as you can see, like the timeline is kind of expressed with all these like circles or pizzas, as we like to call them. And a lot of the process we try to put with this is to visualize elements and also to make them like really, I guess, easy and quick to write. So for example, I'm just going to do something pretty quick. So let's say I'm starting with like this blank slate with the init preset, which is just like 3 rows of 4 circles. And you can just like pick a drum. Right, this is a kick drum, this is a snare drum, and I'm literally just triggering them with my keyboard. So, right, I can just play the different notes.
Can I pick a kit?
Yeah, pick a kit.
I'm sorry for
give us a new
interrupting.
kit.
Let's go for a classic like
707.
yeah.
All right, and then we can just take a drum and put it somewhere in time. So, for example, the kick drum here, right? And let's add a snare. And let's do something more interesting. Let's put some hi-hats in there, right?
It's a hit.
It's a hit, right?
I'm telling you.
Right? But this is pretty boring. So why don't we like split this into like 8 notes, right? Right? And maybe put this all over the place, right? I guess better. Maybe we can put something like a triplet in there. Right? And maybe I want to put something like a big freeze of like, I don't know, this in there. And maybe I want to put this thing in 5/4, right? And I don't know, copy this here, change some velocity, duplicate this, do a few other little slices here. Maybe add some weird swing. Right? So the idea is that there's all these like little quick ways where you can do editing, and you can go like pretty deep with time signatures and subdivisions and sounds and everything like kind of like pops out of the screen in terms of like visuals and everything. So this is like this is really a lot about what we're doing now. Here you go. You can make like really long presets, then you can like kind of scroll right through the timeline and zoom horizontally or zoom vertically if you want to zoom on that axis.
You can also see here, I opened this preset on purpose because it has another like kind of paradigm shift. Okay, so So it has another kind of paradigm shift, which is you can place on any beat, you can place drums, like different drums, which in the standard kind of step sequencer paradigm, you have lanes, and each lane is devoted to a certain drum, and that's how you kind of place drums within the timeline. That's very standard, but we figured, and this is again the thing of like how musicians kind of conceptualize music. Sometimes rhythm is not just like independent points, you know, that kind of happen to be next to each other, independent drum hits. It's phrases. It's different notes that kind of come together to represent something, you know, different. And each color here is a drum. I guess you're sharing screen right now, or
No, I just stopped the screen to have you there.
Oh, awesome, cool, way prettier. Each circle represents a beat, and it holds several drums, and then you can kind of create. You have this freedom to kind of represent how you feel the beat. If you feel like the kick and the snare are really tied together in some relationship, you don't have to have them like separate. They can really live on the same lane. And there's even like, do you mind if I reshare for a second?
Yeah.
There's even like presets that kind of give an example to that. So there is one, we have a tutorial folder in the plugin, which is a pretty fun way to get to know the plugin. So this is an entire beat. I'll just play it and you'll understand. So this is an entire drum beat in a single file, like a single lane of circles. But then if I wanted to split it to different lanes, it would look like this. So there's always, sorry, yeah. Just so I proved that it's the same. Oh. Yeah. So it's the same beat, it just represented in two different ways, like a more traditional way, which each drum is represented on a lane, and then our way, which is kind of more compact. And this is also very common. If you ask two musicians how to play something, they will give you a different answer. So we wanted to like get a product out that has, and that's kind of, I think, an interesting topic to discuss, like what is the amount of freedom we want to offer users and musicians to kind of be individuals, you know, not just to present them as this is how to do something, and if you don't do it like this, you'll get a bad result. So this is kind of what we came up with, and maybe we can do the circle back thing and start from how we came up with the system and everything.
Yes. And yeah, and so back to Josh, what you asked. So this is like I guess you could say an end result of sorts, even though we're still improving and updating Beat Scholar every day. But back to where this whole thing started, right? So let's switch back to, I want to say about 8-9 months
Something
ago,
like that, yeah.
or something, and we were prototyping a bunch of ideas. Right, so Or and I would just like be very, we would just be very deep in the research part. We would just spend all day like talking and conceptualizing, and Or will show you a few of the like early sketches I think that we have of Beat Scholar, because some of the stuff was just like, hey, let's put something on the screen, right?
There we go.
Okay, so this is sketch number 1. It's just circles on the screen. We had no idea we wanted to split the circles just yet. We just knew we wanted something circular, right? Or came up with the circular idea. And
just because circles are nice,
right?
For no particular
round.
reason. Yeah, they're very round, and yeah.
And we had these, like when we started, like it's funny, when we started we called them like M&Ms. Right, and then they became pizzas, and there's a common theme here in our development process, that we eat a lot.
That we're hungry constantly.
Let's look at a bit of it, and you'll see that our idea will slowly develop. Like we'll iterate a lot over something. Like we'll iterate over concepts, and then we'll kind of design them and program a little bit of like just the basic functionality, so we can get a feel, and then we'll go back in another cycle, right? So because almost each group of these is a cycle, right? That Or and I had, because it was like he would say, hey, you know, what about this, right? He would prototype this. We're going to see later how deep his prototypes would be. Like sometimes his prototypes would even have some like interaction on the screen and things moving and display things in a certain way, right?
Yeah, I guess that's a kind of a strength of ours, I'd say, that and it relates to your question at the beginning of like how do you start a company? How do you go from an idea to a product? We have this dynamic between us that we don't get hung up or stuck on ideas. We kind of prototype and we iterate, and we do it as fast as we can. Like, we don't like to leave stuff for later. So what you saw earlier, a bunch of shapes, we had like we were just talking in abstract, like how do you visualize rhythm in like without notation? And then we started to think about shapes and numbers, and then you saw this really ugly sketch, which is just a conversation of ours with me with a laptop on my lap, and I'm drawing shapes and counting the amount of angles. So, and then we didn't like that because it's not uniform, and you could it would result in like a mess on screen. And then, you know, fast forward like a couple of days of just making prototypes, talking about them, and while I was doing that, Eyal already was programming like the first idea with the small circles, the M&M idea. And so while I was kind of ideating and thinking about the next phase, he was already kind of implementing, and we had like audio playing, like drums playing in his prototype. So we have this sort of process where I would be working on the next step while he was programming something for us to test that we were talking about, because you know that sometimes, you know, drawing on screen is really nice and pretty, but then putting it to code is a whole different ballgame.
Right.
So it's really fun to draw a bunch of circles, but then somebody has to eat the vegetables, as they say, you know, and kind of go through the process.
I like programming. It's fun.
No, but I'm just, you know, referring to the amount of time that I spent drawing circles, and then the amount of time you spent making making the prototype that actually plays and reacts. I actually got a little bit into that in our process, but we'll maybe get to that later. To the, you know, I got into eating the code vegetables, if that makes any sense.
So he got you coding then?
Yeah.
Wow.
I caught the bug at a certain point.
Amazing.
Yeah, because what happened with Or was so cool, because we were seeing it first, and he was designing the things at first. But then, you know, or just like, you know, the way we'd work when we would produce music together, is he wanted, you know, to get into like the detail of things, right? We would write some DSP or some effect, and he would say, hey, you know, you gotta let me calibrate this. Like, I want this to sound a certain way. So I'm like, so at first we started with like back and forth, where he would tell me, hey, you know, add more gain stages and whatever. But then I'm like, come on, this is not gonna work. Like, you should have the thing in your hands, and then you can make it sound like you like. And then we've had this like iteration process where I would show, or like the basics of, you know, how the libraries are built when I do some sound design things, and later the UI, and he just, you know, went in and figured it out.
Well, that's being simplistic, because Eyal is kind of, I don't know if it's out of modesty, but the way his libraries are set up is perfect for somebody like me, because he was basically, he made it so he could have like a quality of life, right? So everything is like, it has perfect aesthetics, and it has internal rules that are probably like just great practices for coding in general. And then, like, combined with I had this feeling of, okay, how hard can this possibly be? Like, with everything I've done in my life, like, it's okay, I can learn how to move a picture from left to right on screen, or calibrate a signal chain, or like understand how it's represented in code. Like, it's not, you know, I didn't feel like that would be my limit in terms of comprehension and intelligence. So and then combined with like Eyal's ability to build the tools that we use to develop, it was something amazing to see, because sometimes there is an advantage to being like not from the field, because you kind of think about things in a non-traditional way. And I would ask like, hey, why don't we have something that does this? Like, in terms of, why don't we have a system that makes it easier to perform UI tasks? And then he thought about it for a second. We went back and forth, and like, from the designer, I was playing like the designer, and he was like and we negotiated, and we came up with a system that enabled me to basically take on all the UI tasks, which is terrific because Eyal was in the much deeper coding of the sampler and the sequence area and stuff that's above my pay grade. So it created this really nice feeling of capability with me. So I wasn't like dependent on everything. Like when you design, you have to kind of sit and wait and then see something and then comment on it. I didn't like that as much as I do like you know, doing the design and then coming to Eyal with something that's like actual that you can click and it reacts, and you know, getting into that was amazing for me, and he made it so easy that, you know, it was kind of a shame not to.
So I have so many questions. One of them for me is just going a little bit deeper with that learning process. Can you talk a little bit about that? What that was like for you? So did you find yourself digging through C++ books or going to C++ tutorials, or how did that process happen for you?
I'm sorry, I'm such a bad example. I'm not even one, I guess. But I had like the best teacher on planet Earth as my business partner and close friend. So he went through books and all the, you guys probably know, like he went through everything. So, and it's also a matter of like wanting to get the product out in time. That was my priority. I understood if I have to ask about every pixel, our time to market would be impossible, and you know, the company has to have a product out and to be financially viable, and that's like something very important, you know. So that was the like, it came out of necessity, and then I was drawn in by the feeling that this is endless potential, and I felt so like everything I managed to master had this immense feeling of gratification. So I learned like in very small layers, but it all came from, okay, he's really busy with something. I need to understand how to make a pop-up menu and to connect it to these parameters. So I would kind of take bite-sized chunks, and every time I would ask him like kind of deeper questions. So the learning process wasn't, you know, books and, you know, hours of here, read this and come back to me. It was always, there was always a small result at the end, which we feel like is, I guess, how we both like to learn. There has to be a product at the end of the process you're doing in order for it to be a successful process. Even in music, like we don't like to compose without ending the day with a small file that we can listen to, you know. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, got it. So it's learning out of necessity to get to the next phase more than anything. Is that right?
I'm not able to be genuinely curious in any other way in my life, which has also disadvantages, but that's just how it is.
I think that's the way that a lot of people learn. I mean, it sounds like that was a common way for you to learn as well, Eyal, just from Bass Slapper, was that you have this thing and you know what you want it to be, but from a programmatic perspective, maybe you didn't know how to get there. And so these things became necessary steps, necessary things that you had to learn in order to get there. So it became very much a practical exercise rather than theoretical and just digging into books and learning about multi-threading without any type of context to attach it to. Does that sound right?
Yeah, for sure, and that's also something that we're trying to implement as like a general practice, and I think it's a good practice, both for learning code and to, you know, get a product out. Is we don't try to do everything perfect the first time. Like you've just seen like a few of our early sketches. There's a lot more. Like we don't go out to do something and say, okay, we're gonna program this. The code is just gonna be perfect. Let's make the perfect design. Let's know all the answers to like talk about like code design, right? Like it's gonna have like the perfect multi-threading support, and everything is gonna be perfect. So we don't do that. That if we would do that, and that's something that happened in some projects that I worked on, unfortunately, and that's how you like get in like loops of not getting anything done. You're obsessing about things, about getting, you know, things to be perfect in terms of like being technically correct, and then you don't get anywhere, right? And so what we wanted to do with you know, with Modalics in general, I guess, is we wanted to have like quick cycles where we do something, we review it, we find out what worked, right? Even technically, right? We do something, we say, okay, this system doesn't work. This system is not very solid. Maybe there's bugs. Maybe it's not like easy to write because it's complicated. This also happens, right? We would make a system, and then we realize that actually getting the system to work is painful, right? We would have to like move things from here to here, and there'd be a lot of like boilerplate code. And they're like, okay, we've done the cycle, we've tried this way. Now let's go back. Let's try another cycle of making the process shorter, right? And we would analyze like what's stopping us here. Is this because the calling convention of the code is confusing and we always have to think too hard about this thing? Okay, let's break it down. Let's find out if we can write a shortcut for this so that it becomes like a pattern that we can kind of reuse and not do the same thing and get stuck with the same bugs every day. So a lot of what we're trying to do is have this like feedback cycle where or would come up with this idea or some design, we'd start to implement it. We'd see what are the challenges technically. Is this working immediately for us? Like, is the idea responsive? Is this like an idea that spawns too many side quests? Because that happens sometimes in both programming and design, right? You're drawing something on the screen or you're coding it, and then you're like, okay, to do this correctly, I'm going to need to write like 50 libraries and like I'm going to need to like read books about like complicated DSP, and then you're like, okay, do I really want to do this just for this feature? Is it cool enough?
Or even is this the timing to do it?
Right.
Because sometimes you think, okay, this is like big picture stuff, but right now in order to get from this point to the next, I don't need to calculate the problems of like 6 months from now. And sometimes that stuff kind of stops you because you're like stumped, you're like intimidated by the size of some task, but then you kind of have to have this, for us it was each other, this grounding, somebody or yourself to go like, hey, listen, this is like problems for 6 months from now. Today we just need this to work, and maybe we can show a little example of maybe the circular controls, which was our early experiments into how basically where do you have it? I'm gonna show you like my not this one. Well, this is the second phase. The first one is the beat scholar animation, the first one. So this is like me sending Eyal a video from a prototyping software. So I was experimenting with like what kind of interactions you can have with circles on screen. And it was me like, there's some faulty animations here, never mind that. But it was all sorts of ways to determine velocity and notes and with different areas that you hover on, and they show like this is splits the slice into two. And then this is just me showing off that stuff is working. Never mind. So this is an idea. So we decided to have a cycle on what became circular controls. So this is an initial idea. So we have this conversation for a couple of hours, and then I sit in front of my laptop, he sits in front of the code, and I design and he programs. So immediately afterwards, like talking about hours after Eyal sees this, he sends me something like this.
Right. So this is like a juice version of these controls, right? Where you have like, for example, a slider that goes here, but you can also do like a drag between the different slices. And then here you got like more of like a toggle, right? It's more like a button. And I've made it in a way where you can kind of stack them together in the same circle, just with different radiuses, right? So that they in terms of like the slice, right? The slice is shared. So this and this are actually shared in terms of whatever notes or drum they represent. But then each like layer of this is its own, I guess, part of the properties of the drum. And then do we have the more advanced one here?
I wish.
Oh, no?
We had a version with like I can show it in the Figma, but
this maybe, right?
Oh, yeah, this is another version of the control. So we were experimenting. We didn't even know we kind of experimenting in an abstract way. We weren't sure like what will be velocity, what would be notes, what like we're just thinking like what would be like a good time to make, to interact with the software. And we were thinking that, okay, as soon as we figured out the slices and the toggles, we were like, this is a good time. This is nice, kind of toggling stuff on and off in a circular control was fun. But then like for velocity, we don't have that nice little piece of software. We realized that we can do like sort of a fake sense of distance. If we just add shadows and kind of a gradient of the color, what do you call it? Like the color gradient. So red becomes a darker shade of red, and then the other slices cast a shadow on it. And this was something that we were very excited. The second we figured it out, we were very excited, and Eyal had to sit down and kind of zone in on how to do that well, how to cast that shadow in a convincing way. So this was kind of a fast forward of our cycle, just talking about nothing makes a sound yet. We're just talking about how to control and kind of imagining, okay, if this would do velocity, would it be effective? Would it be fun? Would it feel like, like it's doing velocity basically? And this is kind of an example of what we're talking about, of how we work. And this happens sometimes within a day. Like in the morning, we have the conversation, and at the like 8 o'clock, just about now, we would be sending each other like remarks on the prototype.
Nice. And so were you doing your prototyping mostly in Figma then? Or what were you prototyping?
Yeah, mostly in Figma. I developed the entire design and UI in Figma, and my wife Tal helped me a little bit with Illustrator. She's also a terrific designer, and a small company, and we're bootstrapping, so it's nice to have all the help we can get, and she's really wonderful. Hi, Tal. Yeah, so it's really comfortable because I can like export all the assets in seconds in whatever format I want, and I can do the prototyping thing, which Eyal really liked because it kind of gave him, I guess, at certain points where the going gets tough. So sending him a nice prototype that has nice animations and seeing him like get excited about ideas is, I think it's a powerful tool for any product manager, like, or company owner, to kind of, have something that shows an endpoint in a very convincing way, because it brings everybody, even myself, it kind of gets me riled up,
Yeah, absolutely. And can you talk a little bit, Eyal, about that process of making that Figma document, or that Figma idea, into a Juice UI, and some of the challenges that you encountered there?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot going on there in terms of the UI in BeatScholar, and it's not like or send me this image and I was implementing it. It was more like we each little thing, each circle or each knob or each menu or whatever was like developed over time as we were experimenting with things like which controls should it be and everything. So a big part of the way we were able to do this is we have this design where we keep a very strict kind of separation between what we call the state of the plugin and the UI. And in Juice terms, right, that means that the everything that the UI is doing, like for example, if there's a slider or whatever, then the slider does not interact with anything related to audio. Never. Like the slider doesn't know anything about audio. It's the slider is controlling an abstract parameter, which could be an audio parameter, but actually could also be other things. Could actually be, if we're talking about like the velocity of the drum, right? Could be some abstract value that goes into some data structure far away. And we had to keep this because a lot of what creates BeatScholar is because a lot of the data is super dynamic. You can have an infinite amount of bars on the screen. Each bars could be different time signatures, and the lanes are spread out, and the drums can be different in each pizza. And the idea is that a lot of it is completely dynamic, right? There's a lot of these different options, and for that to work in a way that's reliable, that actually doesn't break every second, you have to make like really strong boundary choices. You have to make sure that the UI only knows about these certain parts, right? So the way for example, we've done this is we have this thing that we call one of the things is we call this thing a parameter, and a parameter is not the audio parameter is an abstraction around a value, and that means we can create, for example, things that are generic, like something that that has the movement of the slider but doesn't show anything. It's just something that moves from bottom to top or left to right. It just has the movement, and it can control a parameter, but it doesn't show anything, because the display of this could be a knob, could be a little pizza slice, could be what else do we have that's a slider in the
We
in
have
thing?
the reverb knob, which is another kind. So this separation kind of makes everything very like able to morph. Like we can come up with controls very quickly because of this system, because of this method. So if we have an idea, we already know what goes into it. So you basically move the mouse from somewhere to somewhere, and that part is taken care of. We just need the drawings. So we either just draw it in code, or I deliver like some sort of SVG, and we go that way. But yeah, what Eyal mentioned now is like how we were able to prototype things very quickly is just having these systems, multiple systems in place that make these cycles like the one we showed with the circular controls very quick. So there's no additional development. Our general rule of thumb would be, if we think this is something that is fundamental in our development system and our conversations, we need to take the time. Like, don't be lazy. We need to take the time and make sure this is never a setback. And I guess like if you do that enough times, you're left with like a pretty solid development system.
Yeah, so there's a few examples, right? So one of the things we wanted to do is, first of all, we wanted to have a fully resizable UI, right? So that you can just stretch it to any screen, and it will work with like big, 6K monitors if you want to, and it will also work with little laptop screens, and you'll always be able to fit it. So we'd have to write the thing so that everything can be totally resizable. But then we were like, okay, when you start to have a ton of bars on the screen, right, then you'll see that suddenly I can start adding bars here, and you can see that the shape starts to change as I'm doing this. And then when I'm going to add more, right, if I'm going to start zooming in, the zoom is actually now the zoom can actually reveal a few of these buttons. So for example, if I do this, right, suddenly the duplicate button shows up, because even though it's resizable, only certain zooms will work for certain amounts of bars. And same with what happens vertically, right? If I'm going to start adding buttons here, at some point, buttons will start to go away so that they're more static, and then you can zoom back in to bring them back. And this only works because we have this very kind of like a layer separation, so that each little bit of this is handled with something that's shared across the entire UI. For example, making something stretch, or making something resizable but with different variations for each zoom or size. So all these stuff are generic concepts that we have in our library. We didn't code those specifically for the bar section or whatever. We coded them for as something generic that can work with any kind of components and any kind of things, because we wanted our entire UI to behave like this. So a lot of what we would do in terms of like getting technical is we have a lot of juice modules that we wrote for our system, and some of these have to do with, I don't know, DSP and the sound area, and a lot of them have to do with UI interaction with the state. Like the UI has a behavior, and it touches the state, and now if you write it generically enough, you can now kind of compose different kind of interactions with different kind of state, which is actually really cool. Like you can, there's something really fun we do a lot when we'll kind of prototype something, and then we'll like, okay, let's make a list of a lot of those, and then let's connect this to these pieces of state, and immediately the UI becomes really dynamic, and that only works because we really like we have these like iterations of how UI interacts. Like if we have this thing where you have to code too much manually for the UI to be interactive, we iterate over this. We write a library object that will kind of do this for our entire UI, and we think of what it means.
Do you want to show the JSON thing?
Oh yeah.
We have a pretty cool like example of what we're talking about, like a very visual example you'll see, which is basically a conversation we had about how to make the visual iterations way faster and to give me a lot of freedom in terms of how I design the UI and how I move around objects. And there's a system we have that allows us to basically not rebuild every time we're doing something like that. It just kind of, you'll see in a second. I'm just trying to burn enough time until Eyal creates the object that he needs. But yeah, I think it will work right now. If he relaunches Beat Scholar and shares the screen, we can show you something really cool. So yeah, you see, let's put some kicks and snares on screen. Just a very quick example. And if he opens a JSON file called colors, and then looks for an article called kick color. So now change it, put blue on 200.
Right, so let's have them both on the same.
Yeah.
So we can kind of see them. So this is blue. Right.
Blue on 200, and kick is the red drum, and it becomes a nice shade of. Oh, this is pretty cool. So we have this for 3 different categories. We have this for colors of almost all elements you see on screen. We have this for the position and dimensions of every element you see on screen, and we have this for what we call constants, which is if he opens that file, you'll see also something cool. Objects that get replicated across the screen many times, we can put in a file called constant. So if he takes beat slice stroke and makes it 3, you'll see that the boundaries of every. Oh, okay. So that's actually also pretty cool, but it wasn't supposed to happen. Yeah, you know how it is. So 2 would give us a thicker boundary around each circle.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, 3. Okay, there we go. 3.0 it needs to be, or 4.0. So just imagine that as a person designing a plugin for the first time in my life, this is a dream come true because it gave me so much control over everything.
Wow.
And then it's live control. So I don't have to rebuild every time. I just, I need to create this infrastructure in the code at first. And that's what I learned. That's like was my introduction, that and some DSP. And then I could basically follow through from designing in Figma to showing Eyal like here's a bunch of buttons and it all works, and we just need to connect it to parameters. And you can imagine for him it's like a sigh of relief that that part is taken care of. And I think this is something really cool because this system was developed after we were talking about like how would we want to interact about UI.
I'm just putting random numbers in there. I'm making it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
this is terrible. Please stop. We need to dish out an update, and I'm super scared. Anyway, so yeah, this is a visual like representation of what we're talking about when we say working on your tools, like not being lazy. Like we need something. This is pretty like advanced stuff for us. Like we never did something like this. But we took the time to do it because we ended up saving, I guess, hours, if not, weeks of work because we spent several days doing this.
So is this using Juice Live Constant under the hood then, Eyal?
No. So Juice Live Constant is a similar concept, I guess. But this is using my stuff because it does all kinds of other things under the hood. For example, when we're resizing things, we have the thing where we wanted Or to be able to put in his like the dimensions that he would see in Figma, but the system would translate it into something that's stretchable, so it would have like a transform and would actually work with any kind of size. So it's not just like plain numbers. It's got like there's some logic in there for some of the things with how it interacts with our system. So and then the cool thing about it is that when you like this JSON file, it actually goes into the product. Like this is what's in the product. So we just bake it in the product at the end. So whatever Or is developing with the thing, that it doesn't have to go and retype the numbers back into code. Right? We can just put the actual like description file in the product.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, so actually let's ask a couple questions from our audience here. So one question that we have is, do you prototype in the same tech as the production version? So has this always been in juice from the very beginning?
Yes.
Yeah.
But obviously Or will prototype in Figma, and
Yeah.
and we'll sometimes mess with other environments, but generally I don't like the idea, and this is actually something we've tried. So I don't like the idea of having a separate prototype environment because I feel like a big part of what we're doing is saying, okay, let's make this good enough to actually use this and actually try the thing in context of a usable product, I guess.
Yeah.
So the way we like to work is we we write, like I said, a lot of juice modules for things. So let's say we develop a new effect, something that happened with this. So what we would do is we would have a juice module that would just be the effect without the plugin, just the little thing that's the effect. And then we would make some, like the most basic UI for this, maybe a juice generic processor editor or something that would just like the most minimal UI that can be done for this. And then we would have in our system a plugin that's just this, right? Just generic UI and loads that exact module, and then we would say, okay, it's not perfect, but it's good enough to have it tested. So we will just load the same module into the real product. So now the little plugin is almost like something that we continue to use. Because we will iterate over this effect. It's not going to be perfect at first. So we would listen to it, we would try it with the real product, then we would say, okay, this is not good enough. Let's rerun this, and we can now test this and use this and even send it to our friends sometimes outside of like the big complicated plugin. And this is something that's really important for us, right? Because if we had to re-implement this, if this was like a Python script and then we say, okay, this is now pretty cool, let's re-implement this in the plugin. Oh, it's not good enough. Let's go back to the Python script and change that.
Right, there's like a sense of continuity also.
Yeah.
Like we're constantly refactoring and improving. And sometimes, we understand, like Eyal said in the beginning of our talk, sometimes you got to do something dirty for a second just to get to the next step, but we never leave it like that. We always go back and using the fact that we're constantly using the same platform to do everything gives us a strong sense of control by the end of a process like this, where we know every pixel and every parameter where it sits. Okay, sometimes we need to search, but basically we have this sense of continuity. I remember, we both remember how stuff got developed, and we have those traces, but we try to have them organized. Like we don't leave we don't leave the original prototype that was written all dirty in the code naturally. But yeah, I guess that kind of answers the question.
Dimitri asks if you use a different juice component for each pie in the circle, and do you use if you use the juice viewport to handle the scrolling in the window, or is that all something else?
Yeah. So each not each. So technically each slice is a component, but it's not a real component.
Got it.
Hard to explain, but yeah, but basically you can say, if you want to think about this, is that we kind of had to override a lot of the juice system to do this, because the juice system, in terms of handling stuff like mouse events, is not exactly how this works. So let me, I guess, share to explain. One of the things we wanted to do here is to have a lot of continuity in mouse movements, so that, for example, let's say I have, I don't know, that I should be able to do like the, one drag operation, right? Let's make this here, so that I can have something like this, and then kind of fill this with one drag motion, right? Or clear this with one drag motion, or have some really complicated pizza slice, right? And do something like this, and then copy this, and with one motion paste this to the entire row. So we wanted to have these like inter or cross component continuity, right? So that you can do in specific motions. And the juice system, or at least the component, the way it works by default, will not do this, right? It's basically every component will each either it will have its own like clickable bound, then it will capture the entire event, or it will not capture any events, and then you kind of have to capture it in some big level. And so what we wanted to do was, we had this thing where technically, for example, the slice is a component, but it actually has like some bigger system that will route the mouse events, so that it has the actual product logic. So that if I'm going to click this, right, just isolated, then this will be handled by the slice component. But if I do like a drag, then some of it will handled by the slice component, and some of it will handled by the bigger pizza or the bigger row, because it needs to be, for example, one single action, so that I can do this, and then I can undo one action and not three actions, right? So it has to be managed in different layers, I guess. So I guess a bit complicated to explain, but yes, it's using it is using the component system, but it kind of overrides it to create a lot of custom behavior. So yes.
Amazing. Yeah, really impressive, impressive stuff that you've done there. I've never seen that in a Juice plugin. So
Thank you.
So a question from George is, what feature was implemented way faster than customers thought it would, and what was surprisingly complex? So are there any features that you thought were going to be very difficult that ended up being simple, or vice versa, simple ones that you felt were going to be complex? I can imagine.
Such a good question.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific example? I don't know. I mean, we go into such depth about everything that it makes this a difficult question for us. We were talking about this. Sorry, we were talking about this talk before. We're like having dinner and kind of discussing what we should talk about. And then, one of the things that came up is that there are no like, there's nothing that's not important when you're like very much like in love with what you're doing, in a sense. So everything here was giving an insane amount of attention. Like even we're discussing the color coding, which maybe people kind of take for granted. Like it's nice circles, nice colors, and everything. But it took I don't know, a couple of months to come up with 16 colors, and then to come up with a general shade of blue for the background that would complement that. So even stuff like that, it was surprising. I was like, that's something that caught me off guard, because we'll color code 16 drums. What's the problem? Try doing that. It's like the back and forward was crazy, and you end up changing shades by like a single point of green just to figure out if everybody can differentiate between two shades of green, and then the research around that. And then you have to build the system in the code, because we want to reuse the exact same shade. So you can see in the plugin if he pops it up. So the hi-hat has a representation in color on the sequence area, and then it has a representation in color in the sample selection area in the bottom, like both here and here. So it has a lot of systems we made have several representations on screen. So we had to code that in a very intelligent way, because it's, again, the same thing. We figured out this is something we'll be using for years. And we have to have this infrastructure that I don't need to like hand code like each color and placement all over again. We need to have like something that makes this operation very easy, and there's like a, you know, an easy way to kind of say, okay, hi-hat color, right? And then I can even send it to the JSON and change all the places where it's being presented at the same time. So I guess, yeah, that's a long answer, but stuff like that sometimes kind of catches you off guard, because it's kind of like you pull on a wire and then you get this big ball of yarn at the end of it. You're like, oh shit, it's a way bigger problem than I figured out choosing colors, because it has ramifications all across our code base basically.
I have a couple of things that were actually more difficult than we thought. One of them is this little thing. When we move a slider, we have like a text box, right, with the values, and then when I stop moving it, it goes away. Or you can maybe double click and put in some value here. And this is surprisingly harder to do in Juice than you would think, because if you think about like a component, right, in Juice, it has a specific like rectangle around it. Like whatever, a component would be like this thing, or maybe the knob, you know, with or without the label would be a component, right? Just be a rectangle. But then we have these things that show up that are actually totally outside of the bounds of that component. They're somewhere else on the screen, and they show up only when this thing is touched, right? Only when you move this, or only when I double click to put in a value. And this is challenging, because you need some architecture where things would be able to kind of post things almost like a pop-up menu, but they would do it without changing the mouse interaction, because the mouse is still on the knob, for example. So these kind of things are tricky to do, right? Because they're all over the UI. They're so basic. You need them when you're moving each of our sliders and knobs and things like that. But then you don't want something like the Juice slider. At least we don't want that, because the Juice slider has the value always visible. It's always in the rectangle of the slider, and it's really ugly. We wanted more something that's floating, like FabFilter and other like nicer companies would do. And that requires some thinking of how you structure things in, you know, both within a component, but then getting out of it, you know, whenever you want to do that. And same with other stuff. We have like floating windows, right? So for example, we wanted it when you open the About window, then, you know, it kind of draws on top and things get dark, but then, you know, you can kind of click anywhere and close this. So all these things are slightly more tricky than you'd think they are, because there's always something else that kind of needs to be considered when you do them. For example, you know, you open this, maybe you'd have a pop-up menu open and then you open this, right? Or maybe something is playing and then you open this, right? And this is actually still playing in the background, right? So, and all these things would cause really like small unnoticeable bugs in the UI whenever you try to do them. Like things would collide and things would kind of work, but then, you know, the label would get stuck on the screen.
You'd get locked out of the plugin.
Get locked out of the plugin.
All sorts of weird stuff like that.
Yeah, because you're essentially, because every time you're doing something like this, you're kind of painting on the top component, and then you're sometimes taking mouse events from the actual things on the screen. And you want to, and then maybe something was just mid gesture right before. So there's all these like edge cases that you have to deal with, and these are like really simple things. These are not like the glorious things about the plugin. They're just like things you want to move a slider.
I was always taking stuff like that for granted being a user before I was a developer. I was like, oh, of course there's like a pop-up thing that shows the value, and of course there's like everything is nice and the knobs turn, and then you kind of go into the deep end of development, and you're like confronted with, oh, I actually have to make every single decision and stuff. If I don't decide, it's going to be some generic decision that was made for me, and then you're kind of missing out on giving your users you know, the ultimate experience, I guess, or with the way you would see it. So it kind of tests your attention to detail. So yeah.
Fantastic. Tugrul asks, maybe it's silly to ask now, but if you were to re-implement, where would you like to start over? So is there anything that you built upon that, are there any parts of this plugin that you kind of cast your mind back and say, I would really like to do that over, or I feel like I could improve on that?
Everything is perfect, right? Like, we're flawless. Like,
Yes, no, we're all
Naturally.
refactoring bits of it. There's some uglier bits. There's definitely some things that I would, now that I've rethought this and I've solved a bunch of bugs. There's definitely a few things in the logic of the way the sequencer works, because this sequencer can do a lot more than what you see on screen, like a lot more. There's some of these will go into features that we'll add, but some of this is just like internal tests that I've done, because this sequencer is like an abstract machine where each like layer in it can actually modify the previous layer. So it's meant for things like time effects and weird polyrhythms and things that are way beyond like even beat scholar. It's but that also, because it can do all these things, there's some really annoying complexity that I put in there that was actually harmful. That was actually causing problems in the development, because it was just like crazy ideas of mine that I had to have in the API, right? Because I thought that people would want to do such a thing, and then we were like, okay, this feature is there, but nobody would want to do this, and then sometimes the structure of this gets in the way, right? So one of the decisions, like such a boring technical decision that I made, I guess early on, and then reverted it later on, was I really wanted all of the sequencer to be based on something that you can do with value semantics, so that it can just be like very pure values that you could just copy around, and then the sequencer itself could just like modify everything by value, and it'll be like, so I thought it'd be like such a magical idea. And that idea failed in so many ways when we tried to do the thing, and I had to rewrite it, because it was just like and I was really researching how to do this, like researching like all kinds of like concepts about functional programming and value-based programming, and I've spent a long time like in the rabbit hole of this, and then I was at some point I had to like stop myself and say, look, like there's absolutely no reason to do it like this. Like it's just like it's an interesting concept. I'm still interested in it, but it's stopping me from actually putting features. So I had to revert it, and then there's still bits in there from that early concept that should probably not be there, because what it means that there's all these like layers the code has to go through to do something simple, like something we've just did recently. I want to say when you want to like copy paste a bar, and the bar has a different time signature, and that sounds obvious, but it's not, because the sequencer actually doesn't, like the bars are actually not in the sequencer. They're like more of like a connected concept to the sequencer, because they're like more of like abstract timing things. Because I made this because I said that people might not want to have their rhythm arranged in bars. They might just want to have abstract polyrhythms, which is still a cool idea. So a lot of these is now in my way, because there's just so much you have to go through to do simple operations like copy one bar from this side to another side. So I don't want to go into too much like low level detail, but this is really there's been a lot of that. There's still are probably.
You didn't tell me these things.
No.
I should know stuff like this. No, I'm kidding. I remember that week where I was calling Eyal and he says, "Listen, I got to take some time and refactor some things in the sequencer." I think I went around. He was like giving me a talk of like, let's just let me do this thing, and I remember that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you always we now describe the thing in hindsight, right? But we one of the things we know as a constant in our process is that sometimes we screw up and we have to go back.
Mhm.
Oh,
That's
for sure.
yeah, like that's something we know is a constant, and the only thing we're saying is that let's make the process of doing that nice, so that whenever we do have to whatever erase a bunch of our code or change it, then it's easy for us because, for example, we really like, for example, when we wrote the code, we've reread it a bunch of times to make sure that it's understandable, so that when we remove it and change it completely, then we know what we did, right? Because that's sometimes right. That's pain that you run into, right? You write the thing, whatever you prototype the thing, you write it ugly, and you leave it ugly, right? And then you go back to change it, and you're like, oh my god, I just have to remove the whole thing. This is horrible.
And
But you're the way I see it, like you're gonna screw up anyway.
Yeah.
You might as well get it out of the way quick.
Exactly.
You might as well like hurry up and mess it up, and then you can get it right. Because it's really that you got to look at the fastest example of your idea, and then like see if it sticks, and if it does, you're like, okay, I'll figure out how to make this work eventually. But if you don't do that, I guess like you can get stuck for an extended amount of time, then end up with something that's not good for you. So it's bad for developing quickly.
yeah. I think there's a saying, if you're gonna fail spectacularly or something like that. So,
Yes.
Wow, we had some amazing bugs in this software. We had some of the. It's so much fun because it deals with timing, and timing can mess up your head like big time. So, and the opposite, like we added just before releasing, we added the ability to slice beats up to like 42 pieces, which is crazy. You can make like oscillators out of bass drums because of that. Like I have a preset that the kick is just playing bass notes because it's rotating so quick. And that's also like the other side of that, that if you make the system so sometimes stuff, I don't know how to describe it, but stuff it's not supposed to do that, you know what I mean? Like you kind of discover something and then you're like, wait, but this is super cool. This is actually like something usable, So I really want to show it. Do you mind?
Yeah.
So it's called now it's just about the time where I completely forget where it is. No, this is terrible what I'm just oh man. Dead air. This is great. Give me 1 second. Eyal, say something.
While he's coming up with this, there's actually a related question from Jas, who asked, did you use oscillators and noise based for sound, like a sound generation system for some different drums in the program, or is it all resampling based?
The version that's out is all based on samples, but it's samples that some of it is stuff that it's all our original samples. So some of these samples were that were done by Yoni Meltzer, who's is a good friend of ours, who's a very good sound designer, and so some of the stuff is stuff that he synthesized. Right, so he just created something from scratch using a bunch of layers, and there is actually a synth engine in the thing which we thought we might use as extra layers, but it's not there in the product because at some point during the development we decided that like the really the big thing about this is the sequencer. So even though the sampler here is pretty cool, like you can even load your own samples and stuff like that, the real big thing you can do with this is actually use MIDI. because this thing sends out MIDI and can control, hardware and other VST plugins and everything, or can drag MIDI patterns. So, so at some point we decided to just say, okay, let's make the sequencer area amazing and keep the sampler relatively simple, even though it's still functional and still has, effects and.
It's enough to get you going really quick. That's what we wanted, because I'm just gonna play this because I looked for it for so long.
Let's solo the kick.
So these are this lane is just individual kick drums, but they're being played so fast it sounds like an oscillator. And it's something that you kind of look at it and you say, well, this can be like, it's a bug or a feature. It's a classic one of those where should I limit the amount of slices? But then you come up with something like this, and you're like, I guess not. I guess let's just do it 42 because it's the answer to everything.
We have a question from Sudara. Hi, Sudara, who asks, now that you've shipped, have customers come up with any feature requests that were unexpected or that you hadn't thought of before?
So we got a lot of feature requests after releasing this, which is actually kind of awesome because people like the idea and they have all these creative concepts around this. A lot of these were things that we'd probably we thought about and we'd probably do, and we are doing some of those in an update. There's just an update today that we just finished, but to me the biggest feature that everyone has been asking for, which caught us completely off guard, is to have randomizers, which because we talked about this during development, and I kept thinking I don't know. I never use randomizers. So are people really going to use those? And then everybody ask us to put in randomizers.
It's half the world is apparently creating music in a completely random way from our perspective. People are this is great, but it should have probability engines and randomizers and stuff. I was okay, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So now we have to actually add randomizers in there because everyone are asking.
Oh, we're just talking about it today. We're going to do it in our way, we try to do all these things. It's not going to be completely random. We have to have this musical idea of what would be both random, but then will be in context. Because you can very easily, combined with the pizza system, you can go blast off into non-existence in terms of rhythm. So you got to have some sort of control over it, so it's actually usable and not just random noises, which is apparently also what people really want.
Yeah. It'll be the genre creator.
Yes.
We can only hope. The future of pop is just random beeps in some order.
So I'm conscious of our time. So I think it'd be a good time for us to wrap up. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we haven't covered already that you feel would be cool for our audience to know about? Or anything?
Just it's if you liked this product, we have a free trial. You can try it. You can go to Modalics.com and see what we got, see what we have to offer, and I'm always around on the Audio Programmer Discord talking about whatever random tricks to use Juice or weird build system problems or whatever it is that we run into. And also we have our own Discord. It's not like a coding channel, but it's like a community Discord around our things. Come chat with us. You
can send us feature suggestions. We're live on there all the time, unfortunately. We barely sleep, and it's great. No, I just want to say I'm relatively new to these sort of communities. First of all, thank you so much for having us. This has been a blast.
Awesome.
And hoping we have other opportunities to chat. And it's a pleasure to see people so active and so willing to help each other. I've known these community, and your community specifically, the audio programmer, through Eyal over the years, and I've watched the content, but just being on here and seeing all the cool people talking to us and asking questions. It really feels great. So thank you for having us.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words. And yeah, definitely check out Modalics.com. Get Beat Scholar. It's awesome. Can you give us any clues or any hints on what the next product might be? Any ideas? Or is it
Not yet. What we do want to invest a bit in Beat Scholar, so we have a lot of like major features that we want to add. So just to give you an idea, just now we finished an update with a MIDI effects component for Logic. So that was one feature, and we've added like a bunch of little features along with that, and we're gonna invest also in an iOS app, iOS app.
Yeah.
Anyway, which is something else that we've been requested. So we have a little bit of time to get this happening, because we one of the things I've learned from other amazing people I've worked with, like Steve Duda that you've mentioned. Steve Duda, kept improving his products for years, and that's something that I loved about him, and that's one of the things that made his products so timeless, because they weren't just the way they were released; they were like a sequence of features being added over many years.
Yeah.
So that's something we want to do at least for a while.
Yeah, but looking more far into the future, it's, I guess, more stuff that has to do with music composition and taking that sort of side of things and making it kind of flow state process and keeping you like in that sort of space instead of a technical area. So
Yes.
that's the area
Alex.
we're gonna do. Maybe for bass, for
Alex
harmony,
doll.
for yeah.
What about a doll?
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
I have a Figma file right here.
Yeah. Yeah. Or at least a free pizza with your purchase of
Yes.
Beat Scholar.
That's our next collab.
Cool. Thank you so much, Or and Eyal. Thank you very much. And yes, check out Modalics.com. And fantastic to hear your story, and just anxious to see where it goes.